Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I'm going to cover all of my top mistakes to avoid going from Trailblaze level 40 to 50. So I'm Trailblaze level 47 here, and oh man have I made so many mistakes. I'm going to share those mistakes with you guys, and I'm hopefully going to give you guys a bit of insight on how to avoid them yourself and what I learned. For most people, going from Trailblaze level 40 to 50 is going to be a multi-week journey, and you're going to have a lot of time to make a lot of decisions and a lot of big beneficial moves. Now, understanding what those moves are and what your goals are is going to be the biggest step. So let's get into the list and understand what's on the table. Upon reaching Trailblaze level 40, you're going to finally be able to get into the ultra hard endgame, the Memory of Chaos. Now, this requires 8 units, and the Forgotten Hall levels leading up to it, which you might already be familiar with, also require 8 units. But I'm here to tell you that there is absolutely no rush. Building 8 units before you even have 4 done is definitely going to be a pretty big challenge. So my first tip to avoid, and one that I absolutely walked into myself, is going to be don't build a full 8-man roster or more units than that before you even have your first solid 4 locked down. If you want to do stuff like simulated universe runs or overworld grinds and stuff like that, make sure that you have your core team locked in and really strong and as good as you can make it, and then move on to expanding out into the full 8-man and more roster. So definitely don't go too big, too fast, or too soon. The next tip is going to be regarding traces. Don't level up all the traces blindly, as they get increasingly expensive and very, very costly in terms of in-game resources as well as stamina. You can pick and choose which traces are most valuable to your playstyle and what your character is trying to achieve. So while my Sele is fully maxed out here, she probably didn't need to be, and it's probably a much better idea to be conservative and just target the traces which you absolutely need your character to function. For example, Natasha here, she only really needs to heal, so she can just focus on her ultimate as well as skill. There's also a few other traces which you might want to pick up, but mainly those two. You can pick up some cheaper ones as well, but don't go overboard and level everything up, because Natasha doesn't really do that much damage. Leveling up her basic isn't going to make that much difference, so I can save the materials and the stamina there, and that goes for a lot of characters. A character like Japad, who I'm leveling up now, I only plan on leveling up his ultimate, because the rest of his kit, I don't really care about right now. Eventually down the line I'll get to it, but right now, it's only the ultimate that I really need. The next tip is going to be plan out your Echoes of War materials carefully. You're only going to get 6 of these a week, and the power spikes from some of these are immense. Now, we talked about earlier that you're going to want to get your 4 initial units, or 5, pretty much juiced up and ready to go. But after that, you're going to want to expand your roster quite a lot, and planning out who's getting which material and when is going to be a big deal. Now, it's also worth noting and bringing to you guys' attention that once you get to Trailblaze level 50, the traces actually start to cost these materials as well. So any that you can preserve and retain now in these early days, it's going to pay off in the long run when you end up needing them in the future as well. So overall, I would be very, very frugal with these materials. Get the ones you need, but don't go ahead and take everything you need. Like, do I really need 100% energy regen when Japad comes back to life? Well, no, because if Japad's dead, chances are the rest of my team's dead as well. Next up is going to be gear. So from 30 to 40, you might have noticed enemies getting a little bit harder. And if you didn't have any leveled up gear yet, you'd be like, oh man, this is actually starting to get tough. Maybe around Simulated Universe 5 and 6. That only gets harder once you get to Equilibrium level 3 and level 40 and beyond, especially in the Memory of Chaos and Forgotten Hall. So my next tip for you guys is going to be invest in getting some main stat correct gear for your initial cast of 4 to 5 units. So what I mean by that is try and look for purple or gold gear with at least the main stat correct. So you can see here that my Sele has an attack link rope. 22% increased attack is going to boost her attack massively. The difference between a character who has the main stats correct on their, their gear and leveled up to at least level 6, even at purple quality, is massive. It's truly immense, and it's going to make your life so much easier. Now, if you find a particularly good piece or a gold piece, which you're really fond of, you consider taking that up to level 9 as well. But my next tip is going to follow on from this. Never take a piece of gear, no matter what it is, unless it's literally perfect, to 15. Just don't do it. The XP required to go from 3, then 6, then 9, and then 12 is quite a lot. And going from 12 to 15 is all of the amount of XP that you need to go from 1 to 12 but more. So those last 3 levels just really aren't worth it early. Don't max anything out if you can help it. Even if it's a crazy piece, you're going to be taking away XP from another character. Now, it might not matter so much if you're just focused on one team, like 4 or 5 units, but if you do plan to tackle the Memory of Chaos and you like 8 or 9, then you're definitely going to want as much experience available to take pieces of gear to 6 or 9 instead of all the way to 15 on 1 or 2 pieces. My next tip here is going to be look out for speed on all of your gear. Speed is by far the most important stat to nab in the early game if your character doesn't already have access to a good amount of it. So if you're rocking Sailor, she doesn't need speed, she's already got enough of it. But if you're rocking any other character, especially like the Fire main character or Japad, oh man, they really need some speed to start getting online and being super effective. Now, when you're farming up relics, which I'm sure a lot of you guys will be once you hit to 40, there's a really cool trick that you guys can do after farming up a bit. You can actually take a look and see in your stash here exactly which items have speed on them. So you can check and look at all the items and see which ones have speed as their main stat using this filter system here. And you can see here that I have a pretty good amount of speed boots. Now, leveling these up to 6 or 9 is going to give you a lot of speed. Now, if a character has 100 speed and you give them 13, that's 13% more actions in a fight, more or less. And it's also a lot more bonuses than that due to the fact that you can get cool planar ornament sets which super boost up your team's potential. So the next tip is going to be look for speed and also be on the lookout for filtering with the filter. Now, it's also worth noting that the other gear pieces as well can roll speed, not just boots. And you can look for substats on these items, which are basically bonus stats. And that's definitely a really big thing as well if you want to take a look and look for those. So you can see that this chest piece here has speed on it. So does this one as well. See, this chest piece has 4 speed on it. That's a pretty big deal. And that's actually going to really help you out in the long run. And that leads me into my next tip here, which is try to activate your planar ornament sets. A lot of people are going to be farming World 3 for their planar ornament sets, as the sets there are just so stamina efficient. And all of those sets will gain bonus effects if you can get your characters to 120 speed. So using speed boots as well as speed substats in combination with maybe the Wildweed set, which everyone gets a pretty good amount of for free, the 4 piece is going to give you speed, can give you a lot of free extra power really early on by activating that 120 speed breakpoint and giving you a ton of extra attack across your teams for either the supports or the damage dealers. Another tip here on gear is to try and make it so that when you upgrade your gear, you take it to breakpoints of 3. So every 3 levels that you invest in a piece of gear, it's going to get a new substat or an increased substat. So taking a piece of gear to 10, for example, is nowhere near as good as taking it to 9. So most of the power on gear comes from 3, 6, 9, 12, and then eventually 15. Now you can use these breakpoints to your advantage because you can really see what kind of stats you're going to be getting and what you're going to be working with here. So you can see here, I took my piece of gear here exactly to 9. I didn't waste any experience over. If you're just using auto add, you can actually end up over capping the gear and really going overboard and getting levels which you might not necessarily need. So you can take a look and see how good the item's going to be and also get to a pretty good power spike just by taking it to intervals of 3. In addition to that, I'd also advise you guys to be careful with adding in any purple or gold gear to the experience fodder. And what I mean by that is don't waste your purple and golds because you don't know when you're going to need them and you don't know what characters are coming out in the future. It would really suck if you really got a good gold piece of gear, you turned into experience, and then a character came out who would have liked that and it would have been best in slot 4. That's potentially hundreds of stamina to try and get that back and get something similar down the drain. So the next thing I want to give you guys a bit of information on, even if you don't intend to do it, and make sure you guys are aware, are the 2 weekly/daily grinds which you can do in Star Rail. If you're looking for a little bit of extra content and you're wanting to play a little bit more in a particular day or a week, there's some extra things that you can do, which will definitely give you some extra stamina and a bit of a leg up on your progression. Now, the first one is the daily overworld mob farming grind. Now, you can go ahead and kill all the monsters in the overworld, and it's going to give you a pretty good amount of experience in the long run. If you're interested, it gives roughly 200 stamina a week if you would do it every single day. Now, what that entails is, of course, killing all the overworld monsters, but it also requires you to not fully max out your characters when you're ascending and leveling them up. So if you're interested in doing this, I would recommend only leveling your characters to 57. And if you did want to do this and you took them to 60, that would be a mistake that you'd want to avoid, as you wouldn't be able to level up those characters anymore because they would be maxed out. So to give you guys a bit of an idea, I've been going for about 4 or 5 days now in 40 to 50, and my March here was not part of that grind, but my Sally was, and she's gained 2 and a bit full free levels. So that is a pretty big deal, at least from my perspective, and I'm pretty happy with that progress, at least for me. The other grind is the Simulated Universe grind, which you can do every single week. Essentially, all it entails is doing Simulated Universe, doing full runs and doing it on the maximum difficulty. It's going to give you credits as well as relic experience. And if you do the full amount, which is allowed, which is 33 total runs a week, no one's going to do that though. That's a lot of runs. Any amount is good though. You're going to be getting a total of 400 extra stamina if you did all 33, but only a madman would do that. But there's definitely a lot of things on the table if you want to do a few extra activities, which will definitely give you a bit of an edge and make sure that you can get progression a little bit faster. So the next tip I want to give you guys is actually in regards to team building, which might give you guys a bit of insight into some of the units you might want to construct and build and some of the teams that you might want to be interested in. So one of the mistakes I made was actually assuming that I was going to be able to bring a whole lot more damaging characters than is actually reality. So I was thinking, you know, oh man, oh boy, here we go. I'm going to run like 2 DPS and a Bronya and oh, it's going to be great. I'm going to do so much damage. But the reality of things is actually quite different. If you wanted to try and do the Memory of Chaos and like really push it as hard as you can, the limiting factor is definitely damage. But first and foremost, before the damage is even relevant, it's actually just surviving. When you're trying to do Memory of Chaos, what I would advise you guys to do is try and max out the turn limit. You get 40 turns in Memory of Chaos, try and max it out. See if you can even survive first. And in order to do that, you're going to need to bring some serious heavy duty defensive like truckers here, dude. You're going to need to be bringing like Trailblazers of Fire, Natasha, Japad, March, you know, everyone you've got at your disposal, anyone and everyone. And that's really going to be one thing which I wanted to say that I made a big mistake on. I was not leveling up and prioritizing my defensive characters enough. I was prioritizing them, but not enough. I think that if you want to really push the Memory of Chaos, definitely create a bit of more attention to those defensive compositions. You know, it's not going to be all about the double DPS. It's not going to be about using the skill on 2 DPS characters every single time. If I had to say, your teams are probably going to play out a lot more like this than you might expect. So you're going to have one damage dealer, absolutely, like Dan Hang, you know, Serval, someone who's going to be able to use their skill pretty much every single time. But then chances are you're going to have another unit here, whether it's like a support, another DPS, you know, an agility character, anyone, you name it, they're probably not going to be using their skill pretty much at all. And if they are using it, they're going to be alternating between using their basic and their skill. There's pretty much no way you're pushing Memory of Chaos, like deep floors, with using 2 DPS who are using their skill every single turn. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. In these early days, Trailblazers level 40-50, it's just not happening. And in addition to that, I would say definitely entertain the idea of healing more than you're used to. It's definitely going to help you out a lot, and also cleansing more than you're used to. If there's something which is looking threatening and you've got like plenty of time on the clock, go ahead and just heal yourself up. You know, get thick, get tanky, and you know, try and endure and see if you can make it, even if you're not going to make it in time. And the next one I wanted to talk about here is don't underestimate the Trailblazer of Fire's Taunt. In progression right now for the cutting edge progression, which is Memory of Chaos 6, the strategy I'm currently employing, and a lot of other people are as well, is to literally use the taunt every single time it's up. So it's the Trailblazer of Fire's turn, taunt every single turn. So don't underestimate that either. It can be a critical piece to your success. So overall, hopefully that gives you guys a bit more insight into team building. The next tip I've got for you guys from 40 to 50 is try and focus on maximum 10 or 11 units. So you can see here, oh boy, I made a bit of a mistake. You can see my roster has a lot of units really close to max, and I'm actually taking even more of them to max. Now, I'm falling on my sword a little bit here. I'm kind of like the guinea pig. I've been testing a lot of stuff out and failing brutally. And I'm here to tell you that you should not level up as many characters as I did, because I've spread my resources far, far too thin, and none of the characters are as strong as they should be, at least from my perspective. So what I'd advise you guys to do is pick some characters which you know are safe picks, and then level them up, or ones that you really like. I'd probably limit yourself to 10 or 11 tops. Don't be like me. Don't go ahead and level up 14. It's a really bad idea. So that's going to be my tip there. So focus on 11, maximum 12. Just don't go over 12. It's really going to hurt you in the long run. You know, try and stick to 10 or 11, and it's probably going to be really suitable. Now, let's talk a little bit about what characters might be a good pick for you and your terms of playstyle. Alright, so I've leveled up a ton of units, but fortunately I've gotten to test a lot of them out as well. Now, a question I get quite a bit is this character safe to level? Which character should I level? You know, I don't want to waste my resources. Who should I invest in? Well, I don't think anyone can give you a definitive answer on that, because no one can see the future and no one knows what characters are coming out soon. But what I'm going to give you guys is a rough kind of like guideline here on which characters are maybe a little bit more safe than others to level up, so that maybe you have a better chance at, having an account which is going to stand the test of time. So let's dive into it. So ignore this tier thing on the side here. These are just groups of characters to make it easier for me to explain. So down the bottom here, we have the sustaining characters as well as the supporting characters. As I've already alluded to, the sustaining characters are really, really important, at least from Trailblaze level 40 to 50, and I imagine you're going to need quite a few of them, even at level 80 to survive. So leveling up a handful of these is never going to be a bad idea. The two which are complete no-brainers, if you have them on your account, are Bailu and Japad. They are a step above the others, but Trailblaze Fire is also insanely strong, so I wouldn't feel too bad about leveling up either. You really do want to have 2 healers, so Natasha is pretty much a no-brainer as well. And then March 7th, if you don't have a second healer, is basically mandatory. So as you can see here, all these options are pretty much safe. Natasha and Bailu, you need 2 healers, level them up. Japad, insane shields, really, really good even if you have 2 healers. Same with Trailblazer Fire. And then March 7th is a replacement for that second healer. All right, next up, we've got the section down here, the supports. Pretty much all of these are really, really safe to level in my opinion. Maybe with the exception of Asta, as she's a little bit more specific, as she does only work against fire enemies, so they're full of her potential. But even against non-fire enemies, she's pretty good. But I think leveling up any of these over the course of the game, you're never gonna feel bad for having them in your account. You'll find reasons to bring them, and in these early days, you're pretty much gonna bring them to most fights. I think in the first 6 floors, I've brought Bronya in every single fight. And if I had Welt or, anyone, I'd probably bring Welt as well. They're really, really strong. So I think leveling any of these up is probably pretty strong with an asterisk on Asta. I think these 4, if you had these 4, you could definitely level them up and leave Asta on the bench. But if you've only got maybe Bronya, Pella, and Tinyun, Asta might be an option. But overall, I would say the absolute safety picks are Bronya, Welt, Pella, and Tinyun. They all do very different things and they're all very special in their own way. And I think that they do also bring a lot of utility. So those are all safe. Asta with an asterisk, especially if she's one of your only supports, she's fine. But if you've got a lot more options, maybe she's not the best. All right, so next, the hardest part is the DPS. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the safest DPSs to level right now from what we've seen, at least based on how we currently understand the game, Clara and Sally should be pretty safe picks to level up and take pretty far with your materials. They've performed the best, and they also have enough damage where they can kind of work in a lot more situations where they don't really have to worry too much about taking advantage of type vulnerabilities. Now, all the DPS down here are a little bit less on the damage multiplier level, so they're kind of characters who you're going to want to bring when their vulnerabilities are on the table. So if there's an ice vulnerability enemy, oh boy, Yanqing's going to be great as long as you can shield him. Wind vulnerability enemy, Danheng and Sampo, great, fantastic. Fire enemy, ooh, Hook and Himiko. You get the picture. So I think these guys are pretty much, close to universal. I don't want to say it, but they're close. But these guys are definitely a little bit more specific. Now, you're not going to get away with your account only having Clara and Sally as their only DPS, as you're going to run into enemies which are just super resistant to their playstyle or their damage. So you're going to need some other DPS. So the question is, which ones are you going to want to level? Well, remember we want, a maximum of 11 or 12 units, at least in these early days. You don't want to level up more than that. So you've got a few picks here. You're probably going to want, 2, 3, maybe 4 DPS total. And my advice would be try and pick at least one of each type. Don't double up on the type. So you wouldn't want Himiko and Hook, you wouldn't want Danheng and Sampo. If you've got one, at least a reasonable type coverage in terms of your DPS, you should be safer other than not. And my other piece of advice here would be that, exercise a little bit of caution on picking a character to level up if you know a character coming down the line is going to be the same element. Because the one piece of advice here, which I want to give you guys, is that you really don't actually need 2 DPS of the same element. If you're up against a lightning enemy, chances are you're just going to bring your 1 lightning unit. You don't actually need 2, because as we talked about earlier, you're going to want to pack some defense and supports instead of bringing 2 DPS. So try and have 1 DPS of each element. In the early days, you're not going to be able to have all 7, so pick and choose the ones which you think are going to be most relevant. But if you want G1, exercise some caution with Serval, as I think G1 is probably going to replace Serval in the lightning slot for a lot of people if they do end up pulling him. Now, the last 3 characters here, I haven't got a lot of experience with in live, and also the people I talked to haven't leveled up either. So I can't put my name on it and say they're safe to level. I can't even situationally say that because I just don't have any idea. I can say that each of these characters in the right situation can be good to level, and you'll feel pretty good to have them on your account. Long term is another question, but these ones are going to be pretty good. These ones I'm not 100% sure on, and these ones up here, oh boy, they're pretty strong, and they're going to be good in a lot of scenarios. The last tip I've got for you guys is absolutely one which is killing me right now, and one that I really wish I didn't make a mistake on, and that is don't farm one gear set for too long. So I was hell bent on farming the shielder set for my shielding characters. I wanted them to be insane so that I could survive indefinitely, and I'm really glad that I did that. However, I think I farmed it for way too long. I was farming it looking for spectacular gear, best in slot gear, and I did find some pieces which were crazy, but then I continued to farm, trying to get full best in slot gear for just a few characters. And I've stayed there for, I think, just a little bit too long. I'm almost level 50 now, and I haven't farmed any of the gear for my other characters right now, and they're really lagging behind. And I feel like I should have swapped off of this type of gear a long time ago. And I think what I should have done is farmed up some acceptable gear of, gold and purple. It doesn't have to all be gold. And then moved on to a new set, which would really help out the rest of my team. So in reality, in hindsight, what I would have loved to do is farm up some acceptable gear for my shielders, and then move on and farm up some wild wheat sets for my DPS characters as well as my supports, because they're really hurting for it right now, and I don't want to invest materials in gear which I'm not confident in and then end up having to salvage that later. So I'm really in a sticky situation where I've fallen quite behind where I'd like to be because I didn't swap off and farm some new gear when I really should have. So that's going to be my final tip for you guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video, and if you learned something new from my mistakes and all the things which I did wrong, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's going to be plenty more videos like this as we continue to progress further and further into the game, and there's also going to be plenty more guides. And if you like this video specifically, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. Until next time, hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Cheers.